Good day. I'm Jeremy, the Zoo Nerd, coming to you live from my backyard in beautiful Los Angeles, California. How's everybody doing today? I hope you're well. I hope you're happy. I hope you're healthy. And I hope you're doing something fun today. Today's Critter Chat is going to be talking about, in my opinion, some of the weirdest and most bizarre animals that share our Earth with us. We're going to be talking about the monotremes. Now that's kind of a big word, but it involves a specific order of mammals that are very different than all the other mammals, especially since they lay eggs. Today we're talking about echidnas and the platypus. Now these animals are kind of grouped together because they share a lot of similar weird features that are very different than the other mammals. And they all come from the Australia-Asia area. So that's Australia and a big island just north of Australia called New Guinea. There are 4 species of echidnas and 1 species of platypus. So there are 5 total species of monotremes. They share a lot of similar features and a few different things. So we'll talk about those as we go through. But first of all, let's talk a little bit about where they live. So the platypus, it lives along the eastern edge of Australia and a little bit into southern Australia. And then there's an island south of Australia called Tasmania that is part of the country of Australia, but it is separated from the mainland of Australia by a bit of ocean. They're pretty prevalent throughout Tasmania. I have a friend who visited in Tasmania, and she said that she could walk out behind where she was staying, and platypus lived in the stream right there, and she saw them every day that she was there. So it was pretty remarkable to me that this weird animal that I've never seen is pretty common in some areas. Now there are also 4 species of echidna. One of those species is called the short-beaked echidna, and it lives along the edges of Australia, the southern and eastern edges of Australia, and a bit through the middle as well. It can live in a variety of different environments, from everything semi-arid, so almost a desert, to alpine or high mountain areas in Australia, and that's 1 species in all of that area. And then there are 3 species of long-beaked echidnas. That means their snout is longer, and they all live on the island of New Guinea, north of Australia. They all live in kind of mountainous areas, and we do not know so much about them. One of them, it's a species of long-beaked echidna, has actually never been seen alive by scientists. They know it as an animal that exists because in 1961, a museum got a specimen or an animal that had died, and they kind of did some research on it to find out that it was different than any other long-beaked echidnas that they had. And they named it after Sir David Attenborough. If you don't know who he is, he's an amazing biologist who does a lot of nature shows for the BBC out of Britain. And this long-beaked echidna is named after him. They know it from one individual that was collected for a museum in 1961. But in 2007, the Zoological Society of London confirmed that there are burrows and tracks of this animal in the range where they believe it to live, but they still haven't seen one. That's pretty remarkable. Echidnas are very mysterious. There's a lot we still do not know about them. There's a few things we don't know about platypus, but we know them a little better than the echidnas. First of all, let's jump in on some of the things that make them so unique, so different from the other mammals. So first of all, as we organize animals or any living things, the first word is kingdom, right? So we say, is it a plant? Is it an animal? Is it a fungus? On and on. These are animals. They fit the needs for animals, and they have a skeleton. So that's the next one. It's a vertebrate. So it has a skeleton made of bones or cartilage. And then they said, oh, it's a mammal because it has fur and it produces milk to feed its young, so it's a mammal. And then they said, oh, wait, these are very different. So then they get their own separate group all the way down to their species level. And those are called the monotremes. And they're so different, mostly by the fact that they lay eggs. So that is the huge difference from all other mammals. 99.9% of mammals give live birth. These 5 species, the platypus and 4 kinds of echidna, lay eggs. Now their eggs are not like bird eggs. They don't have a hard shell. They kind of have a leathery shell. And their eggs are actually really quite small. The echidna eggs are about the size of a grape, and the platypus eggs are even a little bit smaller than that, about the size of a jelly bean. So these are tiny little leathery eggs. And they lay the eggs, and then the eggs hatch typically about 10 days later, so they don't have to incubate eggs very long. There's some birds that have to sit on their nest and incubate eggs for months, and there's some reptiles that bury their eggs and they don't hatch for like 8 or 9 months. So these mammal eggs, they hatch pretty quick, 10 days. There also are a few other weird things about them. They don't have any teeth. Neither echidnas nor platypus have teeth. The platypus, of course, has that duck-like shaped bill. That's actually kind of leathery covering on the outside, not hard like a duck's bill, more soft and kind of a little bit squishy, but there's no teeth in there. And then the echidnas, they kind of have a very pointy snout that's very skinny and long, and they have a very long sticky tongue that comes out of that, kind of like an anteater. The platypus, in its leathery bill on the front of its face, can sense electricity. What? That's crazy, right? So that's a way that they help them to find their food. They can sense the little electronic vibrations that all animals emit as they move. So that helps it to find its food in the murky water that it lives in. The other crazy thing about these guys, the monotremes, they have a cloaca or a cloaca. And if you don't know what that is, that's kind of a unique body part that birds and reptiles both have. It means that they have one opening at the end of their digestive, reproductive, and urinary tract. So one hole does it all. It's kind of a very odd thing that we're not very familiar with because we don't have that ourselves, but a cloaca is a pretty crazy thing, and for a long time this helped confuse scientists of where do these weird animals fit categorically, because they lay eggs, they have a cloaca. Are they birds and reptiles? But wait, they have fur and they produce milk, so are they mammals? So kind of crazy. To further complicate things, they are technically warm-blooded, but they struggle to maintain their body temperature in extreme environments. And their body temperature is lower than other mammals. So most mammals have an internal body temperature, like ours is usually around 96.9 or 97 degrees. Some mammals run a little warmer at like 98, 99, even 100. For the monotremes, they top out at like 90 degrees. So they're a bit cooler functioning than us. And like I said, when it gets really cold, they get very lethargic and kind of just go hunker down in their burrows. Now they don't technically hibernate, but it's almost like that. So also kind of crazy weird things that's going on with them. So they do have mammary glands, they produce milk, but they don't have nipples to get the milk from the mom to the baby. So instead, her milk, she just lactates that. It comes out through pores on the underside of her body, and it's kind of seeps along specialized hairs, and the babies just kind of lick those hairs to gather the milk. So it's very different nursing procedure than you would see in all the other kinds of mammals. So very, very different and unique animals, the monotremes. In fact, the word monotreme refers back to the cloaca. Mono means one and treme means whole, so one-holed animals. So yeah, very, very odd. That means they poop and pee out of the same hole, and also they do their reproductive functions through that same hole. So kind of weird, kind of crazy. So they also, the males of both echidnas and platypus, have this little weird thing that the scientists call a spur. Think of it kind of like a thorn on a rose that's on their back foot, near their ankle or their heel. Now on the echidnas, it's just kind of this little pointy thing that they use to sometimes fight with rival males, and it's like this little pokey, jabby thing that they can like poke each other with as they like kick each other with their back feet. On the platypus, it goes to a whole nother level because that little spur is attached to a venom gland. So they are a venomous mammal. So if they poke a human, it will irritate the skin, it will cause a lot of pain, and it will hurt really bad for up to a couple of weeks. If they were to poke with that spur something smaller, like a dog, a medium-sized dog, the venom is strong enough that it could kill a medium-sized dog. Crazy, right? These animals are so weird. They're so different than so many of the other animals we know about. So let's talk a little bit about some of the specifics. So a platypus, you've probably seen photos. If you saw the photo I posted earlier today, that is not a photo I took. I tried to find the clearest, best photo on the internet, and that was the one I selected. And yeah, it's a good photo, but kind of a weird animal. When scientists were first studying platypus and they first found a sample of a platypus that was not alive, they thought that somebody had played a trick on them. They thought that they had cut off different parts of different animals and put it all together. Because they have this kind of weird bill like a duck, but it's made of leathery keratin, kind of like our fingernails, but more soft to the touch. And then they have a tail, kind of like a beaver, and feet that are webbed, kind of like a beaver. Although they can do something pretty weird. When they're out of water, they can retract the webbing between their toes, and that helps to expose the nails or the claws on their digits to help them climb and walk a little bit better. Oh, this is also something that's kind of weird from other mammals. So most four-legged mammals, right, their arms or their legs, they kind of sit underneath the body, and that helps them to kind of move like this on the land with their arms and legs kind of going down below them. With the monotremes, the echidnas and the platypus, the arms and legs are kind of more like reptiles, and they sit out to the side. And so their bellies almost rub against the ground as they move, and when they walk, they kind of move and walk like a lizard does. They can't go very fast, but they kind of, really echidnas, they kind of amble like this as they walk. It's really kind of funny. I think I have a video that shows that from an echidna that I was watching, so I'll see if I can post that up later today. So how big are these guys, right? Platypus typically are between 15 and 24 inches long. So they're kind of small with a 5-inch tail behind them. Platypus that live further south, so especially like the Tasmanian platypus, are bigger than the northern ones that live up in the north edge of Australia. They typically top out at about 3 pounds, although some can be as big as like 5 or 6 pounds. In the wild, they think they live between 7 and 14 years. In zoos, they can maybe make it to 20. They spend 10 to 12 hours a day looking for their food. So let's talk about their food for a bit. Platypus are carnivores. They eat other animals. So the other animals that a platypus eats are very small things like insects, underwater bugs and beetles, larvae of other insects, and then worms and shellfish. They're specifically going after a type of crayfish that live in Australia, that live in the fresh water there. That's kind of their favorite main food source. So some of these animals live along the banks of rivers and lakes and streams and kind of hide down in the mud on the bottom surface. And so the platypus dives down, and then they can electronically feel any of those vibrations coming off those other animals, and that helps to guide them through their bill, their nose and mouth essentially, to help them find their food. So pretty bizarre, pretty strange. They are capable of closing their eyes, their ears, and their nostrils underwater. But they can't hold their breath for too long, so they're typically only underwater for about 2 minutes. On often less than that. And so they don't go very deep. The deepest they typically dive is like 25 feet deep, which may sound pretty deep. Some humans can dive that deep. I don't think I could, but I know some others who do without like respirators and breathing equipment and stuff. They also have cheek pouches on the side of their mouth, so as they're finding food down there, if they find a bunch of crayfish or worms or whatever, they'll kind of gobble that up with their little bill and then store it in their cheeks, and then they'll chew it up and swallow it when they get back up to the surface. But I said chew. They don't have teeth. How do they chew? Well, inside their bill, they kind of have ridges on the inside of their bill, and as they're eating their little animals, they also ingest or take into their mouth some sand and some gravel, and those things help kind of crush the little foods that they're eating, which is kind of weird, kind of strange, but it's a very effective way for them to get their food and break through the like harder shells, especially if you think of something like a crayfish or like a shrimp. If it has that outer shell on it, you don't want to eat that. The platypus doesn't either. So they kind of crush those up and then spit those out the side before they swallow the soft spots. What else do they do? Oh, so they spend about 10 to 12 hours a day looking for food. And it's not actually during the day. They're more nocturnal or out at night, active at night, looking for their food. And then during the daytime, they go into a burrow on the land, up on the riverbank, usually a little hole that they dig in the kind of softer mud along the edge of the stream, maybe under some reeds or some bushes, kind of like what's behind me here, where they can kind of hide from other animals. They would definitely have a lot of different predators in Australia, including things like birds of prey, some big lizards, some big snakes, and then things like dingoes, dogs and cats and foxes introduced by humans, and in the northern part of their range, crocodiles that would be in the water with them and around the riverbanks as well. What else do we have about platypus? Oh, they're also listed as near threatened. So that means they're not very endangered. That's really good news. But in recent years, they've noticed some local populations have declined, especially as things like pollution have caused problems in some of the water sources where they live. They live most of the nighttime while they're hunting in water, most of the daytime when they're sleeping on the land. But they are always very close to a river, lake, or stream. They don't wander out into those other areas too much. There's also problems with some of those waterways as people build dams or take water for irrigating crops. And especially, as you may remember, Australia had really big bad fires about 6 months ago. That was caused by a huge drought, so they weren't getting enough rain for a very long time, and a lot of those rivers and lakes and streams started to dry up quite a bit, and that would cause problems too. And in some areas, platypus numbers definitely have declined because of things like that. So let's switch over and talk a little bit about echidnas. So that's the other photo I posted today. That is a photo I took. I have seen echidnas. I've actually worked with echidnas at the Los Angeles Zoo. There are 4 species of echidna. One species is the short-beaked echidna. That's their snout again. And that's the species that's photoed in the photo I posted earlier today. And that's the only species that's in Australia. The rest all live on that other island north of Australia called New Guinea, and they have a longer beak. Now, the longer beaked echidnas we still don't know a lot about. New Guinea is a very hostile island to try to visit. It has extreme environmental factors. It has a lot of volcanoes, a lot of really thick forest. It's owned by 2 different countries, Papua New Guinea and Indonesia. Both those countries are not super interested in having scientists come, and sometimes there's a lot of political trouble and turmoil there. In addition to the habitat is just very, very difficult to get there, so we don't know a lot about the New Guinea or longer-beaked echidnas. Echidnas can live a very long time, especially for an animal that's pretty small. So the ones I worked with, the short-beaked echidnas, are about this big. Different species between 14 and 30 inches long. They weigh between 5.5 pounds up to 22 pounds for the biggest of the long-beaked echidnas. But the short-beaked echidnas, they have documented several individuals that have lived into their mid to late 50s in zoos. One at the San Diego Zoo was at least 58 when he died. So that's a very long lifetime. They don't really know how long they live in the wild. There hasn't been enough of them studied to really put a good estimate on that. They have that very long snout that they use to eat bugs is the main thing they're going for, including termites and ants. They're sometimes called the spiny anteater. And if you look at the photo I posted earlier, you can see that their body has all these little quills or spines on it. So sometimes when people see them, especially when I was working at the Los Angeles Zoo and people would see the echidna, they would think it was either a hedgehog or a porcupine. And it's not either of those things, but it does kind of have those same prickly like spines or quills on it. Now I've touched an echidna. Those spines are sharp, they're pokey, but they don't necessarily hurt you. They're not gonna stick into your skin like a porcupine can, but they will protect the echidna kind of the same way that a hedgehog can. And so when they are threatened, they will either do three things. One is they'll kind of try to roll up into a ball, kind of like a hedgehog, but they can't do it as tight as a hedgehog can or like an armadillo. Two, they will try to dig away, and that is their best defense because they are expert diggers. And three, they will try to run away. They're not very fast at running, but they're probably a little faster than you would think that they could be. They can definitely move when they need to, but they are expert diggers. And as they dig, their arms and legs sit kind of off to the side of their body. With their front paws or claws, they can go directly out in front of their nose and kind of push the dirt back, kind of like how we sometimes swim, if you ever swim like this. That helps move the dirt around them, and then their back feet actually kind of face backwards and help push that around behind them. So as they're digging down into a hole, the only thing you can see is kind of this spiny part of their rear end as it gets deeper and deeper. And their spines all kind of face backwards, so that helps move the dirt around them really quickly. So that's their best defense, is to kind of hide from that. Echidna's natural enemies would be things like dingoes, and since humans have been in Australia, things like dogs, cats, and foxes. Those animals tend to sometimes be able to flip an echidna over, and then they can kill it or eat it pretty easily. Despite the fact that they're good diggers, they're very good swimmers. I saw a photo of an echidna out in the ocean not that long ago swimming. It was a little video. It was really remarkable, super clear, crystal blue water, and the echidna was just out there swimming around. The people who took the video assumed that the echidna probably either left the mainland and went out to a little island that's offshore, or was on the little island and was headed to the mainland. But it was just kind of paddling in between the mainland and this island. So pretty crazy that they're pretty good swimmers. They are also pretty good climbers. At the zoo, we would sometimes see them climb over logs and rocks. Nothing high, they weren't necessarily up in trees, although some people in some areas have described echidnas as being able to climb up trees. I've never seen images of that. What else? Oh, they have a very long sticky tongue that helps them to get the bugs, the ants and the termites, and their very sharp claws, especially on their front feet, help to tear open and dig for those bugs. So they can dig really well in loose soil, but they can also dig in soil that's pretty compacted, and they can live anywhere from like almost the desert to up in the mountains and throughout all the forest and grasslands in between. So they actually have a pretty good wide range for the short-beaked echidnas in Australia. So when the female echidna lays her egg, she only lays one. It's about the size of a grape. She has kind of like a little pocket, so it's not really like a pouch like a kangaroo has. It's more of just a fold in the skin, and she'll keep that little egg in her little pocket. And then when the baby hatches, it stays kind of in that little pocket and helps. That's in the area where she lactates or produces her milk, and the baby will lick the milk up off of her longer hairs in that area. And then when the baby starts to get a little bit bigger, they say at about 50 days old, it starts to develop its spines. And as soon as those start to kind of poke through the skin, she kicks it out of the pocket. I don't blame her. That would probably be pretty uncomfortable to have something pokey kind of pressed against your belly, but it would also be that the baby's getting bigger. I have some photos that I'll put up later from the Taronga Zoo in Sydney, Australia. Had baby echidnas a couple years ago, and so there's some good photos from them that I can share. Here in the United States, there's several zoos that have echidnas, and one of those is the Los Angeles Zoo. The Los Angeles Zoo is one of the few zoos outside of Australia that have specifically been able to breed echidnas, and I worked with the echidnas, the mom and the daughter that was born during my time in LA. So we also had some male echidnas. I never saw the male echidna. I was never their specific keeper, but in my training to be a zookeeper and on days where they were short-handed, I helped them out. So I never saw them every day in a row for a long period of time, but I did get to know the two female echidnas quite a bit, and they were really remarkable animals and really cool to work with. At the zoo, we fed them a mixture of kind of like dog or cat food, as well as some mealworms, so some little bugs, and then a variety of other things. And we would put most of it in a blender and blend it all up to make kind of a soupy gruel for them that they could lick it out with their tongue. And we could put it in all sorts of fun containers for them to kind of challenge their ability to get to their food, which was always fun and exciting to see how they would interact with them. So one of those was a big piece of PVC pipe, like sprinkler pipe, that had holes in it. And it was mounted to a big board. We would put the board on the ground, and they would eat the food out of these different holes. After a while, they figured out that if they could flip the whole thing over, it would just kind of ooze out on the ground, and then they could lick it up off the ground. So they started to do that on a regular basis to get their food quicker. But they definitely loved to get bugs, and they would often do that. They tend to be a little more active in the early morning or in the late day, not active so much in the middle of the day. But they will also sometimes be active at night. That kind of fluctuates depending on where they live and the temperatures. They don't like it super cold, they don't like it super hot. So they try to be outside and looking for food when it's the right temperature for them. Our special shout out today is to the San Diego Safari Park. They are the only zoo in the United States that has platypus. That is a recent change for them. They just got their platypus in the fall of 2019. They have a male and a female, so I believe they're hoping to have babies. We don't know if that will work. To my knowledge, there has never been a baby platypus born outside of Australia. In some of the Australian zoos, they have platypus and they have had babies there. The little zoo in Tasmania has particularly really good success with their platypus. Other people kind of struggle to take care of the platypus in a way that helps them to be able to have babies effectively. So San Diego Safari Park got their platypus last year. They were the first zoo outside of the US, or outside of Australia, to have platypus in 50 years. That's a very long time. The platypus is considered an icon of Australia, and it's a very sacred and special animal to the Aborigines of Australia. So there's kind of a lot of extra guidelines and regulations to having them. I have never seen a platypus. It is something I hope to do when quarantine is lifted. One of my short-term goals after that happens is to go to the San Diego Safari Park and see their platypus exhibit. I have high hopes of being able to finally see them. I have been fascinated about them since I first heard about them as a kid, and the more I learn about them, the more I'm amazed at such a weird and bizarre animal. Like I said, echidnas do live in a number of zoos. I did work with them at the Los Angeles Zoo. They also have echidnas at San Diego Zoo and San Diego Safari Park, and a handful of other zoos around the United States. They're amazing animals as well, smarter than you would think, and very, very interesting animals to work with. So those are the facts that I have to share with you today about the monotremes, these very bizarre, very weird animals from Australia and New Guinea. I'll be posting some more information about them later today on the Facebook page. Feel free to like, share, follow, and subscribe to the Zoo Nerd profiles across any of those platforms, and full videos are always uploaded to Facebook and YouTube. Although I have had some technical difficulties with YouTube, they should be good now. I think I figured out the glitch and we should be up and running. But if you've missed any of the episodes, today is day 46 of Critter Chat, so there's a lot of information and things that I've shared out there. Feel free to go back and look at any of those and share it with your family, friends, and anyone else who might be interested. Until tomorrow, good day, have fun, take care of yourself, be safe. Bye.